Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're a preaching pastor or a homiletic student, you already know the heavy burden of the study. We've all been there, right? It's late on a Tuesday, the coffee's completely gone, and you're just staring at this massive sea of empirical, Koine Greek syntax, parsing verbs, mapping clauses. You don't just need a linguistic data dump. Actually, you can't just have a data dump. You need a dynamic, life-transforming sermon ready to go by Sunday morning. And honestly, the gap between that ancient grammar and your modern pulpit can feel like a massive, unbridgeable canyon. So how exactly does empirical Koine Greek syntax translate directly to the pulpit? Well, today we're unlocking what is basically the ultimate practical solution to this weekly challenge. We call it the Systemic Functional Linguistics and Verbal Aspect Homiletic Bridge. We're going to take highly technical text parsing and discover how it literally acts as a direct, mechanical pipeline right into your sermon prep.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're using 1 John chapter 1 as our definitive case study to map out our four-step framework: crossing the homiletic bridge, structuring the expository outline, preaching the aspectual peaks, and translating stance to application.
Now, linguistic data absolutely shouldn't be some abstract academic theory. This SFL pipeline shows exactly how these function as mechanical tools on your workbench. First up, the textural metafunction. That's how the author arranges information and it directly formulates your sermon outline. Second, the ideational metafunction. Combined with verbal aspect, that hands you your sermon's big idea. And third, the interpersonal metafunction, which shapes your pastoral tone and your mood force.
And this brilliantly illustrates the authoritative formula for synthesizing the text's dominant processes into your primary sermon proposition. It's simple. You take the central participant of the text, combine it with their primary process action, and then add the aspectual or theological focal point. Bam! That is your big idea. This guarantees your central preaching proposition is perfectly anchored to the original syntax. No guessing required.
So, applying that exact formula to 1 John chapter 1, we immediately generate this massive, text-driven main idea that anchors the whole shebang. God faithfully cleanses and advocates for those who walk in light, confronting false claims of sinlessness and providing Jesus Christ as our righteous advocate. See, that isn't just a nice creative summary. It's the direct structural output of the empirical data.
Step 2. Structuring the expository outline, or basically letting Koine syntax write your sermon. Now, what's really interesting here is how fronted sensory verbs and structural themes literally hand you your expository outline on a silver platter. Take a look at verse 1. The author massively front-loads these sensory relative clauses, that which we have heard, which we have seen, long before ever giving us the main verb. That grammatical suspense, that becomes your first sermon point, the tangible ground of our faith. Later on, fronted negative nouns dictate your next major point, zero tolerance for darkness. The non-default word order signals major structural shifts. The syntax is your outline.
Moving right along to step 3, preaching the aspectual peaks using Constantine Campbell's spatial aspect.
Okay, listen closely because this is a real game changer. Here is where we must completely obliterate traditional flat temporal models of Greek verbs. You've got to drop the past action with present results legacy model entirely. Throw out your dot and line preaching diagrams. Seriously, peach them. Koine Greek tense forms do not semantically encode time. They encode spatial proximity and remoteness. Aspect is all about where the author is placing the camera, not the clock on the wall.
We can visualize Campbell's axis of proximity and remoteness like this. The aorist tense form, that's your remote, helicopter view setting up the background. The present tense form is your street-level view, the unfolding, ongoing foreground. In the perfect tense form, that is your camera zoom. It brings the action into intense, heightened proximity directly in front of the listener.
Let's look at the aorist. Notice how John uses the aorist tense form perfectively to lay down foundational narrative baseline truths. He uses verbs meaning we gazed upon, we touched, was manifested. From a helicopter view, he is anchoring the incarnation as a complete, unshakable historical reality. As a preacher, this is exactly where you establish foundational theological bedrock for your congregation.
So the absolutely crucial point is this: when you hit a perfect tense form in the text, you are hitting a textural magnifying glass. That is exactly where you turn up the homiletic intensity. You aren't talking about a past event with lingering results, you are zooming in on the listener's immediate present heart condition. You use this spatial zoom to make the application feel pressing, intimate, and totally unavoidable.
A brilliant example of this is 1 John 1 verse 10. The opponents claim we have not sinned, using a perfect tense form. Now, John isn't just referencing their past timeline. No way. He's using a spatial zoom to highlight the peak arrogance of claiming total, immediate immunity from sin. When you preach this, you zoom right in on the self-righteousness hiding in the pews today.
And finally, step 4. Translating interpersonal stance to application, which means mapping grammatical mood directly to your pastoral force.
Your tonal guide for the pulpit breaks down like this matrix. Indicative moods have high modality. They demand bold theological certainty. Imperatives or volatives, those require direct moral commands, a clear call to action. And subjunctives, especially in conditional frames, are invitations for deep contingent self-evaluation. Your modern pastoral application force must precisely match the ancient mood choice.
So when John uses high-modality indicatives, declaring that God is light, that he is faithful and just, or that we have an advocate, your sermon tone must be unwavering and authoritative. You are delivering absolute divine realities here. This is not the time for tentative advice or polite suggestions. You plant your feet and you declare these truths as absolute bedrock, demanding mental alignment and faith.
Conversely, look at the subjunctive hypothetical frames. Things like, if we say we have fellowship, or so that you may not sin. Here, the text is urging the listener into a severe internal evaluation. Are they walking in darkness while claiming the light? Your preaching tone here shouldn't be commanding. It should be deeply diagnostic. You must probe the congregation, urging them to test their daily lifestyle against their boldest professions of faith.
Let's see how this all builds to the pastoral resolution, bridging us right into 1 John chapter 2.
1 John chapter 1 is incredibly severe, but right at chapter 2, verse 1, there's a massive, cohesive boundary shift. The text shifts away from harsh diatribe to a really tender, vocative address, my little children. This reveals how empirical koinonia syntax perfectly balances stern warnings with profound Christological comfort. After exposing the darkness of sin, you use the text's own relational pivot to offer the ultimate safety, Jesus Christ, the righteous propitiation for the whole world.
So I leave you with this provocative thought. Will your next sermon merely transfer academic information, or will you use this SFL pipeline to bridge ancient syntax into an immediate, life-transforming reality for your people? You are now empowered to use koinonia Greek, not as a frustrating linguistic hurdle, but as your most potent, intensive homiletic weapon. So zoom in on the text, let the syntax preach, and ask yourself, what will your camera zoom capture this Sunday? Keep digging deep, and we'll see you in the next explainer.